That didn't. Okay, so I will get the other side of this made so that you guys will have both of the pieces of paper to see a little bit more about, and then give you some more ideas how to look into who this angel of Jehovah is. So I just wanted to hand that out to get started, because we are, as we go through month 2, we see the angel of Jehovah coming back in and playing a prominent role. The angel of Jehovah is who is going to be leading them on this exodus, and they are to obey all of that he says. So that is that. So let us get started now on month 2. Yes.
Question about this. Is this the angel that's in the cloud and the fire?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The cloud of the day and the fire of the night. Yes.
That would be that same angel that leads them. And so, and it's really fascinating too, when you consider that it is that angel that is leading them. It's the cloud, it's the pillar of fire. And when you go over, I think it's in 1 Corinthians, where it's talking about when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they were baptized into Moses because the cloud covered them, this cloud that had the angel of Jehovah. So if this is Jesus that is on top of them, they have the Red Sea on both sides and a cloud over the top of them. Well, a cloud is water vapor, so they are totally surrounded by water, which of course then emulates our baptism, and that is how we get into Christ Church. And so if you consider that it's Jesus that completes the covering, but then it's Jesus we're baptized into, as we talked about last week, God doesn't do anything by chance. Everything he does, just layers upon layers upon layers of his awesomeness. And how the Old Testament really does fit that shadow of everything that's to come in the New Testament. So everything then has a reason for everything we do now.
Well, I don't know if I had forgotten it or I just hadn't realized it, but where the children of Israel were walking on dry land, the cloud was darkness to the Egyptians and a light to the Israelites.
Yes.
And if I've ever heard that, I don't
I was
remember.
thinking like Carolyn, and I read, I thought, oh, I've read that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fascinating when you get into the whole thing about how God can be one thing for his people, but can be something totally else for those who hate him. All right. Any other things about the angel of Jehovah before we move on? Okay. So as we look here in month 2, so in case you guys haven't, this is Andrea. So Andrea, we are covering the 10 Commandments. That's what this is. So in month 2, we are looking at idolatry. So thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. Cindy relates a story about how she goes to the nail salon to get a rare pedicure, and while she's there, she begins to notice just this very in-your-face idol worship of Buddha. And when we can, and she decides that when this is done, that she will never frequent this salon again, because she will not use her money to support outright open disregard for Jehovah and him being the only God. And this is something that as Christians, I would encourage us to all be very aware of. We live in a capitalistic society, which means our money votes. Our money gives approval for things. Our money tells people that we support them or we don't support them. And especially when it comes to luxury items, getting your nails done is a luxury item. I don't shop at Starbucks because the owner, CEO, whatever said, if you believe in biblical marriage, I don't want your money. Ooh, you won't have it anymore. So, those are things we have to be aware of. If I continue to shop at Starbucks and I know he has said this, Netflix, that's a big thing, recently, and all the garbage that is Netflix. If I continue to give my money to Netflix, I'm continuing to support they're pure disgusting. So like we canceled Netflix like 2 years ago when they, and I'm like, I'm not giving my money for this. So as Christians, I would just encourage you to be aware of those types of things. And then she talks into another really big form of modern day idolatry that we would see a lot in our lives, being the Roman Catholics, and how they essentially worship the saints. I can remember being a young child and going to a Catholic walk-in, and they said, well, we don't worship Mary. And so I came home to my mom and I'm like, Mom, they don't worship Mary. And she said, do they pray to Mary? Yes. Well, that's one of the ways, we show worship to God, is when we pray to him. So, and when you think about, the 5 acts of worship, sing and to pray and to give and to take communion and to hear the lesson, it's very clear. And so they pray to the patron saints of different things. They have the patron saint of travelers and of illnesses, and I don't even know what they all are. But so in our modern day world, we will come into, even in the Christian realm, we will come into people who idol worship. So let's get into number 1. It wanted us to go through Exodus chapters 16 through 20 and list every instance in which God showed in these 5 chapters his provision or his power. These people should have been convinced way before Sinai about the infinite God they were serving. So we've gotten out of Egypt with all the plagues, and now we're on this travel from Egypt to Mount Sinai, where God is going to make the covenant with Israel, with this nation to be his people. So what did you guys find in Exodus chapter 16 that is either God showing his power or God showing his provision?
The manna, the food, manna and the quail.
Man and the quail. I love it. They're complaining about all the great, the great, wonderful things they had to eat in Egypt. But yet it's like they called out to God, save us from the slaves. Oh yeah, God saved us from being slaves, but now I don't have anything to eat. It's like he can provide. Growing up, I always thought this quail was a regular thing that occurred. I was doing some study recently, and this actually appears, and it makes sense as I've gone back through and read, the quail appears to be a one-time thing. The manna being daily, but the quail was probably a one-time thing where it was so much quail that came in and they were able to preserve it. So however that they dried it or whatever, fermented it, whatever the process was, the quail was, just a one-time event that would have gotten them kind of essentially through building the tabernacle and everything, and then working their way, because it took about a year to build the tabernacle and then to work on up to Canaan, where they all said, can't do it.
You said it covered everything, didn't it?
Yes. Yes, it was all over the place. So not only do we get meat that they could have cured, fermented, dried out, whatever, that would have lasted, but he gave them the manna.
With the manna and everything, it just kept going on, because he fixed it where if they saved it to the next day, it stank and got worms.
Yes.
But it didn't do it when they saved it for the Sabbath.
Yes.
And
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's amazing how God can, it's like, okay, this will only last you for 24 hours, but this will last you for 48. And especially it's like nothing in their environment changed, just the food. I was really struck by how God says he's going to do this to test them. And then you have the people who they hoard the manna and it rots. And then you have the people then on the 6th day who don't gather extra. So on the 7th day, they're hungry. And I'm wondering, the same people who failed the first test, are they the same people who failed the second test? Are we kind of slow at getting that God is going to do this? Or is it, maybe their neighbors didn't have the manna that rotted the first time, and so they just, that they made a completely different mistake in terms of failing God. But God still tests us today, and I know I have failed those tests way more than I would like.
For my idea of the manna spoiling, I used to think that it was the same people, but they were scared that it was gonna spoil.
Yeah.
So I gathered extra.
After making the first mistake, well, we got in trouble once for this, it's going to happen again, so I won't do it. Okay. Carolyn, were you going to say something?
Well, I was gonna ask, what's an Omer?
In Omer is about 2 quarts or 2 liters. Those are pretty close to the same thing.
This is a tenth of the EFAS.
Well, see, my lovely footnote says an Omer is about 2 quarts or 2 liters, and an ephah is about 3/4 of a bushel, if you got that one, or about 22 liters. So, yeah,
Mine only says
so about 2 liters worth. So that's a good amount. And they did different things with it. They baked it, they boiled it, ground it up, different things. All right. Anything else for 16? All right. What about 17?
Well, provided water,
Provided water.
and then the power would be that the water tank is going to provide.
Yes. Sorry. I loved it when we get to verse 7, and as they're quarreling about some of this stuff, they ask, is the Lord really among us? And it's like, really?
Yeah.
I'm like,
I've not seen it.
it's like you still don't get it yet. And it's easy for us to look back and criticize them, but we do it today too. There are plenty of things that we question, that we don't obey God completely, but it just, it's kind of,
When you cross
That's what I was saying.
a sea and the walls of water are here and you're on dry land. And
Yes.
the water that's just there a minute ago. I mean,
yes.
and it wasn't even mud.
yes, I said it's dry.
Well, and the
Walking on a tube.
And the fact that it's been one thing after another, like every time there was something, God had been there. So the fact that they're still going, is he here? It's like, man. But they have been so entrenched in idolatry, because think about that. Even when you're in this idolatrous world, there were plenty of times when people would have prayed to the false gods, people would have worshiped the false gods, whatever. And they would have seen that the false gods didn't come through. So maybe they're waiting on, because there are plenty of things that could have just happened, where they prayed for rain and then the Egyptians got rain or something. And so they can say, oh, well, we prayed and here it is. It's like, being from Oklahoma, the traditional rain dance. It's not raining. So Native American culture would, they would do the rain dances and, oh, it would rain, where that's not really what caused the rain, but they equate it with that. So maybe that, the Israelites are so used to seeing these false gods who have come through but then failed. Maybe that's why they're still waiting on Jehovah. They don't get that he is real yet. He is the God.
I also have the battle axe on verse 13.
Yeah, we have the battle with Amalek. Okay. Yeah. These people were not warriors. They were slaves. They were builders. That's what Pharaoh had them doing, was building pyramids and cities and different things. So these people really didn't have much of a clue how to be warriors. Throwing bricks. But God brings them through that. But then he also has the miracle of how he achieves this victory. And I like the fact that, we get a little creative here. Moses is supposed to be holding up his arms so that the battle goes in their direction. If you've ever tried to hold your arms up for very long, so he has to sit down and then other people have to hold his arms up. And I'm going, man, their arms are going to get tired too. At what point do we?
He probably worked some all day.
Yeah, it's like he rests while they hold it.
Didn't they prop it up with something? Yeah, stone.
Yeah, he sits on the stone so that he's on the lower level so that while they stand, they can keep his arms propped up.
Oh, okay.
So that account just always, I don't know why, but that's one even as a kid, I'm just like, wow.
I would have propped his arms up on my shoulder.
Okay, did we get anything for 18?
Well, I just put that he provided Moses help with the judging. He sent Jethro
Mm-hmm.
to tell Moses what he needed to do about judging the people. Because, and I think the Lord probably sent Jethro, it didn't say that. But
That's what
Moses was wearing himself out,
Mhm.
judging everybody's problems. Because we're talking about
Millions.
millions of, well,
Yes.
maybe not millions,
But a million.
probably or thousands and thousands of people.
Well,
So he needed help, and the Lord saw it.
when we count like the first census, when we're counting the men, there was like 300,000 plus men. And so then when you equate the families that go with that, and those are only fighting men. So that doesn't include the retirees over here, you know, they don't have to go to battle anymore. So we are looking at 1 million plus people. So yes, how does he judge all them? And I missed it until I was going over it with Lyra, and Lyra's like, well, I think he sent Jethro.
Oh, did it say the Lord sent you?
No, it doesn't say
Okay,
that.
I didn't know, I couldn't remember, but he knew Moses needed help, so.
Yes.
Jethro just says, God shall be with thee.
Well, and as you look at it, I am inclined to agree with the fact that he might not have sent Jethro with the specific message of this is how you need to, you know, tell him to judge the people, but he sent him an older, wiser counselor. And in doing that, we are able to, you know that God does send people, you know, his providence does send people into our lives to help give us knowledge and insight. So that is probably a good, and the fact that Moses is never told that's bad advice, Jehovah says don't do that. You know, I think it's safe that we can assume that because God didn't condemn this, that God did go ahead and allow this. Being, again, providentially, God is sending Jethro. And as we look at Jethro, we didn't get to talk about this previously, but Jethro is a Midianite. And Cindy actually did a bit on this that talked about who the Midianites were. And I never had any idea who the Midianites were. But scholars believe the Midianites are Abraham's descendants from his second wife after Sarah. When he marries again, one of their children is named Midian. And so that makes sense. And it also makes sense as being a descendant of Abraham, he would know more about the true Jehovah. So we can kind of see some of that because, you know, Moses' father-in-law is a priest of Midian and different things. But we do see later that the Midianites did not have all of their act together. In fact, as the Israelites are coming in to take over the land, the Midianites are one of the groups that conspire to try to keep them out. And they're part of the group that brings in Balaam. I always get Balak and Balaam messed up. So while some of them might have known the true Jehovah, they also were a nomadic people. And so apparently not all of the Midianites knew who Jehovah was, or at least worshiped him properly according to the patriarchal standard. So a side note on Jethro. So Jethro's advice might have been really good in terms of a biblical God's standard. All right, 19. What do we see there? Let somebody else answer.
Go ahead, Lyra, and I'll tell you what I got after you.
I had the storm on the mountain and the trumpet blast. And that was verse 19. That was verse 16. Verse 19 is God's voice. That's in thunder. And then I have verse 18, which is God comes to the mountain as fire.
That's what I put.
So we see God coming down onto the mountain. We see this huge storm. We see this thunder, the lightning. We have this trumpet blast. There is nothing that would indicate this is actually from the camp of Israel at this point. It is, this may be God sounding the trumpet, not really sure.
When he was coming to right on the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, in 16,
Verse 19. Oh, okay, yeah.
and in 16, it says, on the morning of the third day, there were thunders and lightning and a thick cloud on the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. And so all of the people in the camp trembled. Now, trumpets, Dale's talked about it, and about how these are warnings. You would use it to call people to order. If nobody in your camp has the job of the trumpet blast at this point, and you hear a really loud trumpet blast, that might be a little disturbing, oh, we better listen because we haven't called the assembly. And then the smoke and the fire that settles down on the mountain.
The mountain is right.
Yeah, the whole thing. I can only imagine how terrifying that would be. Yes.
Once when I was a kid, I was out in the yard and there was a hole in the clouds and the beams were coming through and I ran and told Mom that Jesus was coming. I mean, it couldn't have been any more what you
Yes.
kind of picture. I mean, it was just the beams shooting out and
It
it freaked me out.
And even here, the mountain was shaking.
yes.
Now, that would be scary.
Yes. If you've ever been in an earthquake, even the little ones, like it's enough to, it just messes you up. But I mean, this is quaking, just really shaking. There's the fire, there's the trumpet, and God is speaking, and it's the sound of thunder. I think about Paul and how when Paul is on the road to Saul is on the road to Damascus, he hears Jesus talking to him, and the other people apparently can hear him, but they can't understand what's being said. So as I'm wondering, are these people here, are the Israelites experiencing something similar where all they're hearing is every time God speaks, it's just this rumbling thunder just on and on, or is there any words distinguishable in this?
Well, he spoke to Moses. And then
Yes.
Moses told him.
Yes. So it really just powerful.
I just think of a booming,
Yeah.
echoing.
Well, and you get those big thunderclaps and they'll shake the house. And so, they'll shake you right to your core. And so, I can just picture when God is speaking and there's all that thunder, that's what type of thunder I'm thinking of, is it just all the way down to you.
I remember when we had a lightning strike close to the house and it shook the
Yeah.
whole house.
We did have a lightning strike close to us once, and that was scary.
Yeah, you can feel lightning in your heart.
Yes, that charge. Yes. Very, very, this really would have been a frightening event. But the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So these people have questioned God the whole way, and God really, he's making his presence known. Yes, I am here. I am among you. Let's get down to business. What did we get in verse 20? In terms of God showing power or provision.
Well, in verse 22, it said that he talked to Moses from heaven. That's power.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only one I can find, really, but I'm sure there's others.
I got the 10 Commandments from provision.
And that, I didn't think about that either until Lyra and I were talking about it. Child gives me all kinds of ideas. God is giving them provision for spiritual well-being. He has provided for their physical well-being all along this journey. But none of those Egyptian idols could do anything for their spiritual well-being. No modern day idol can do anything for our spiritual well-being. God is the only one that can provide, and he provides it for them. We saw last month, whatever it is now, where the law was given to us after sin came. Like the law helped us to know what was sin. How can I please God if I don't know what he expects of me? So he gives them that provision. So I thought that was, really important for us to understand that, he's done way more for them than just physical at this point. Okay, let me. All right. 2 and 3 were some more of these copy work things. And God makes it pretty clear. He did not just give, like when he's doing the 10 Commandments, he didn't just say one time, no idols. He says it over and over and over. And he makes it pretty clear that these idols, it doesn't need to be, no animal, no creature, nothing in nature. But we still see that today. People who, I can't think of the word, media calls them tree huggers and things like that. But those people who are they worship the creation. They are the ones who are very much more concerned about the planet than they are about people. They're more concerned about the planet than they are about there being a God that we need to please. So even though we don't necessarily always think about just the creation in general, because when we look at creation, we should be looking at it going, wow, God is amazing. Look at everything God has done here. But other people, unfortunately, make this an idol, the earth an idol in and of itself. Okay. Number 4. So again, God is making himself very clear. So it wants us to look at Deuteronomy 4 and look at similar prohibitions from this chapter.
Which prohibition?
You're not allowed to do it. You're prohibited. You're blocked from doing it. You are prohibited from having dinner. Let's
I
see.
haven't had.
You haven't had dinner. We're late.
I am going to have to.
Okay. So as God is continuing to, when we go to Deuteronomy, this is the second giving of the law. So in Leviticus, we have the first giving for the group that has just come out of Egyptian captivity. We are able to see that they, despite everything, that even when they get up to Canaan, they have no faith in Jehovah at this point still. We cannot go in and conquer these people. But again, in all fairness, they are not a warring people. They are slaves. They're hard workers. We can see that in how they build the tabernacle. but they're just not prepared to trust God. So they have to go wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And then we come back to Deuteronomy, Deutero being second. So this is the second giving of the law. So they were supposed to have already, God's given the first generation these commandments. They should have been teaching their children as they went along. God is now, though, very much directing this at this new generation. He's not letting their parents' version of the law, their parents' thoughts on the law get in the way. God says, look, forget them. They're all dead. I'm focused in on you. This is what you need to do for me. So what do we have in chapter 4 where God is telling them that idolatry is not okay? What verses?
I got 16.
16.
And then in verse 2, he tells them that they can't add to the word or the ministry.
I didn't think about that, but yeah. Okay.
That's a prohibition.
Yes, yes. And just think about it, though. When we add to the word or when we take away, we're putting ourselves above God. Well, an idol is anything that we put in front of God. So when we add to or take away from God's word, we're becoming the idol because we're putting ourselves over God because we know better than God. So I like that one. I missed that.
16.
She had 16 and 25 and 2.
There may have been others. I rushed through that. I don't know what else is there. Is that what you got?
What did you say?
Well, verse 2, he prohibited adding, okay, and then he prohibited the graven images in 16 and 25.
Okay, I have 23 as well.
23. Yes, I see that.
Okay. Did anybody else have any? Okay. I start in verse 3 where it talks about how it says, your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor, for the Lord your God destroyed from among you all the men who followed the Baal of Peor. So for me, it wasn't necessarily like he's saying, don't do it. He's saying, man, all those people who did this, I took care of them. So for me, it's an implied command. If God's going to kill you for doing it, I probably don't want to do it. I also have verse 15. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully, since you saw no form on the day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. So for me, I saw it because he's talking about the form. So he's telling them, you didn't see anything that would give you any type of image to make. How do you make an image of thunder and lightning? Like, those are pretty intangible in terms of fixing it. And then,
I guess you can make like
But even at that, what you just said, the Egyptians, they did have the gods for all those things.
yes,
So there was still any of that in their teaching.
Yep.
That they passed down. Didn't they?
yeah, that's true. Because, I mean, and I don't know as much about the Egyptian gods, but I know Roman mythology I'm way more up to speed on. And so, yeah, like you have Zeus, who is, the god of lightning and things like that. So, when they can't create an image of it, they create a figure that represents that. Zeus isn't lightning, but, he represents lightning, so. I had all of 16 through 19 as well, where it was talking about the whole thing, about no graven images. I also got 28. And there you will, let's see here. And there you will serve God of wood and stone, the work of human hands, that neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. It's talking about how in 27, the Lord will scatter you among the peoples. Like this is this whole thing where, I guess it's the whole paragraph there, where he's talking about what he's going to do to them if they bow down to a false god. And then let's see here. And then I had like 33 and 34, and then I had like 35 through 40. So basically I'm like, I just put everything in there, didn't I? Because he just keeps talking about how you didn't see any images. You didn't see any forms. You didn't see anything that you could do this for. So don't do it. 34, has any God ever attempted to go and take a nation for himself from amidst another nation by trials, by signs, by wonders, by war? It's like no other God has done this. I'm the only God who's done this. Nothing compares to me. Was there anything else? Seeing as how I just listed the whole chapter. Sometimes it just keeps going, and it's like, well, where do I? This is why like verse numbering is kind of silly, because when the Bible was written, it was not written in verses. It's written in letter form. So it's like we arbitrarily have stuck these verses in, and it's like, I understand why, but it flows together. It's all supposed to be one. All right, and we'll cover 5 real quick, and this will be all of week 1. For an apt account of the sin upon sin that occurs when a person lives as if there is no second commandment, read Judges 17. List the progression of evil below. This one I found just really fascinating. I have looked at this account before and kind of studied it, but 17. But I have never listed it out like this, and as I listed it, it really was kind of disturbing to see the progression. Did anybody get to this one yet? Well, Susan, you nodded your head yes, therefore you just volunteered, right?
First thing I have is in verse 2 where he told his mother that he stole from her.
Okay, so first thing he does is he steals. So what did we have next?
What verse 5 says he had a house of God.
Okay.
And then he set up one of his sons, the priest.
Okay. I got into a little bit more detail, and it was really funny because as I was done listing, I actually had managed to get 10 steps in here. I was like, hey, we're covering the 10. So the first thing I got was that he stole from his mom. But then I got that he only returned the money after his mom had pronounced this curse. So it was like, oh, and mind you, back then when they would curse and bless people, like they really were calling upon Jehovah to follow through with what they have pronounced upon somebody. So it was pretty serious. So it's like, oh no, I'm in trouble now. I got to take care of this. But then she's the one, because her son who stole from her and only returned the money after the curse, she devotes the money to be made into an idol. So I guess, she's seeing the fact that, well, this curse really did work. It brought my money back. So thank you, God. I'm going to make an idol for you. And 200 of the 1,100 pieces, that's a pretty good portion of, that's almost a fifth of the coinage. So then, the fifth one, Micah, he makes this shrine in his house, and he has the ephod and the household gods made. So we didn't just do one big image, like he went ahead and had the household gods made as well. And historically, if you do some research on household gods, these household gods were actually kind of represented in some like legal covenants and things like that. They're not just little deities that they're worshiping. They have more significance than we ascribe to them when you historically look into it. It's been a while since I have, so I can't give all the details, but it was fascinating to really see what household gods are. So then he ordains his son as a priest. So what happens after he ordains his son as a priest? I don't know. I did not write the verses as I went. Right here,
Well, for
7.
one thing, the priest had to come from the Levites, was he a Levite?
No, he is of Ephraim. This man is in the hill country of Ephraim, so he is not of the Levitical line. And
then along comes
yes,
a man who is a Levite,
then we do get a Levite.
and he appoints him as priest.
Yes, and it's really kind of funny the way it's worded, because he basically says, you come be my, it's a young man, you come be my priest, and you'll be like a father to me. But then it said, like, so the priest is going to be the father to this man, but then Micah becomes like, this man becomes a son, like Micah takes him in and kind of has this son relationship with him. So nobody knows who the parent-child, like there's this whole messed up parent-child relationship. So nobody knows anything, that's going on here.
Hires him because he pays
Yes.
him,
Yes.
gives him clothes,
What?
food.
And that's another thing when we look at this, the Levites, they lived off of the sacrifices, like the sacrifices that were brought in, the food was provided by the sacrifices, but they didn't necessarily get a paycheck. There wasn't like, all right, here's your monthly 5 silver coins or whatever. So he's definitely done that wrong. And the other thing is so the Levites were the priest, but when it comes to certain parts of making sacrifices and everything, and who was to preside in the tabernacle, then later in the temple, it was a specific group of the Levites. It's the Aaronic priesthood. So we have Aaron's descendants are the ones who are actually the ones who are hands-on doing the sacrificing, whereas the other Levites are more of the background workers. We keep everything going. And we don't have any indication that this young man was of the Aaronic line. He's just a Levite. So we were overstepping even in terms of what he could do as a Levite, even if he was doing this legitimately. And the young man accepts, right? So this young man should have said, no, I can't do this. But he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do this. I'll have a nice cushy job here. And what's the last thing that we see happening here?
Well, he thought since he had a Levite, that the Lord would be good to him.
Yep. So this is where I really got chills, because he's done all of these sinful things. And then he goes, God's going to bless me now. Look what I did. And I'm going, how many times do we do that? How many times have we in our lives done something and we've just followed this progression down the wrong path? And hopefully, maybe I'm the only one who has messed up that bad. I hope so. But I'm telling you, when you have walked that path and you get to that point where it's like, well, of course, I'm good. God's going to he's going to take care of me. But you realize, wow, I've been walking in sin this whole time. I can't believe I'd ever ask God to bless me for this. So that one really kind of shook me. So I thought that was really fascinating, that progression of It's a little sin, it's a little bit more sin, it's a little bit more sin, and by the time we get to the end, we expect God to be okay with us. Not even to be okay with us, but to just be grateful that we did it and to bless us. Maybe you'll have to read. It's 13. Lyra was like, I was really hoping they would stay back in month 1. I haven't had a chance to. So poor Lyra's behind now. So she's struggling here as we go through this.
Well,
All right.
that's all right. We struggle with it too.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because I get to do the study twice as I go back through it with her. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I get a new perspective as I go back over with her. And
But you know, there's nowhere there in that chapter that said the Lord disapproved of that, of him, you know, saying that about the Lord will be with me, seeing I have a Levite. But how do we know that that was wrong?
well, you're right. He does not, we don't see where God says that was wrong, but we know based on what God's commands were that this would not have been approved of. So there are plenty of times where we see, again, there are lots of times as we're looking at some of these historical accounts where we know it wasn't right, but we don't actually see God going back, and every single time this happens, God says, well, this is wrong and this is why it was wrong. This is where we have to know what God expects of us. And so as we read through these historical accounts, we're able to go, yes, that violated his command. So he made idol. Well, he stole, which we'll get to that later, but that's another one of the commandments. He stole, so that's not good. They devote it for an idol. Well, God had said you can't have any idols. Not only did he make the big idol, but he made the household gods. He set up this shrine. Well, where are they supposed to worship? They're not supposed to worship in their house. Well, yes, they're supposed to worship at the tabernacle. So here they are providing worship in a place where they're not supposed to be worshiping. So as we follow this progression, this is just where we can see, based on everything that God has said, it's wrong. We also know that the Levites, because the Levites were supposed to get their livelihood from doing the service of the Lord, but they weren't paid. That was not how it worked. And so, again, it's just that progression of, and sometimes it's hard to know this, and there are plenty of times when I've read through something and I don't catch everything, and then after I've studied something else and I come back to it, I'm going, oh wow, they were really messing up now that I know this better. So there are lots of times that we see that. It's just, even in the New Testament talks about there was a time when God overlooked sin. The King James Version says he winked at it. Basically, he's saying, it was that time where things had to fall in place. The chronology had to happen to get Jesus there. I mean, we can look at Genesis and God sets up one man, one woman, that's marriage. Well, then we get to the Kings and they have wives and concubines and different things like that. Do we ever see where God says they were wrong in doing that? No. But is that what God designed for marriage? No. So
No, but he did allow it then.
he did. Okay. And so it's that he's overlooking those sins to bring forth something else down the road. It wasn't that it was necessarily okay with him that they did it, but the sacrifice hadn't come yet, which also then makes us more accountable in the New Testament, because we have the sacrifice and we have the entire word. We are at a place in history where nobody has ever been before. Not only do we have God's word, but we have it readily accessible in a language we can understand. Even previously, when the Bible was compiled, there were lots of times and places where you couldn't access it. You couldn't read it even if you could access it. There's historical information about people would literally line up for hours and days just to be able to take their turn and having like 5 minutes to read the Bible. So we are at a place where we have it. It's accessible. It's, we have the book, we have apps that you can get in like all kinds of translations and compare them and different things. So where we're at historically, we can look at the whole picture and see where God overlooked things, but where he says now he's not going to overlook those sins, and we have to be willing to obey his word. So I think that's one of those things where you're right, it doesn't condemn him, but when we go through and look at everything and what he's already told them and giving them the 10 Commandments and then setting up the Levitical priesthood and the Aaronic priesthood, we can reasonably deduce, draw conclusions.
Infer, we call it.
Yes, there you go. Any other?
Infer, we used to have the infer thing.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions about the study tonight? Are we all just like wiped out going, whew, it's been a deep week with Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, and
We churched all week.
we have. It's been wonderful. The New Testament, the first century church met daily. I really wish that we did that a whole lot more. So I love the fellowship. I even love the fact that we can meet people on the internet. So
Cheryl,
Tracy is. Cheryl never joined us. I don't know. Cheryl she wasn't here last night.
yes, she was. Cheryl was here.
Was she? I didn't see her.
Yeah, she was sitting in the back by Tracy.
No. Wednesday night.
Oh.
That was last night. I was like, how did
I don't think they were here.
I was like, yeah, yes. So, all right. Well, you guys have a lovely,
I
yes,
have a trivia thing.
trivia. Okay.
We're doing the Deuteronomy 4, it talks about the kings and stuff, and I've always thought this is interesting. King Og of Bashan, in 3:12, it says, for only King Og of Bashan remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of the man.
Mm-hmm.
That's 13.5 feet long and 6 inches wide. That's one big man.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to, it's fascinating when you look at how big people used to get. But of course, anymore, like as the genetics come back around, like we got some,
Talks like that's the last of them.
yeah. All right. All right. Well, we will head off. Tracy, we will see you later.